The morning I met my son's fiancée, I had just finished fixing the fence along the east side of the property. My hands were dirty, my boots were muddy. I was wearing the same flannel shirt I'd been wearing since 6 in the morning, and there was a streak of grease on my forearm from where the old gate hinge had finally given out after 11 years. I heard the car pull up the gravel drive before I saw it. A silver sedan, clean and new. One of those lease specials that people in their 30s buy to signal things about themselves. My son got out first. He looked good. He'd put on a sport coat, which told me he was nervous. He was always nervous when he wanted something. She got out of the passenger side, and I want to be careful here about how I describe what happened next, because I've thought about it many times since. She didn't say anything cruel right away. She didn't have to. She looked at the house, then at the yard, then at my old truck parked beside the barn, and something crossed her face, not quite a sneer, but the cousin of one. The kind of expression people make when they've confirmed a suspicion they already had. Then she looked at me, standing there with my dirty hands and my muddy boots, and she smiled the way someone smiles at a child who's drawn a picture that isn't very good. "You must be Martin's dad," she said to my son, even though I was standing right there. My son cleared his throat. "Dad, this is her, my fiancée." I wiped my hand on my jeans and extended it. She shook it lightly, the way you shake hands when you're trying not to actually touch someone. "It's good to finally meet you," I said. Likewise, she was already looking past me, toward the house. I had lived in that house for 22 years. I bought it after the divorce, when my son was 11, and splitting his time between his mother's place in Richmond and my place out here in the Shenandoah Valley. It wasn't a grand house. 2 stories, white clapboard siding, a covered porch where I drank my coffee every morning and watched the light come over the ridge. I had put new windows in 3 years ago. I had refinished the floors myself. There was a garden along the south wall that I kept better than I kept most other things in my life. She looked at all of it, the way an appraiser looks at things, not with appreciation, but with calculation. "How much land do you have out here?" she asked. And that was the first question she asked me. Not how I was doing, not how long I had lived there, not anything that you would ask a person you had just met. "How much land?" "About 14 acres, I said. She nodded slowly, like she was filing this away. My son was looking at a spot somewhere above my left shoulder. He did that when he was uncomfortable. He had done it since he was a teenager, and I'd asked him where he'd been. We went inside. I had cleaned the house the night before and made coffee. I had put out a plate of the shortbread cookies I'd made from a recipe my mother left me, which sounds like an old man thing to do, and I suppose it is. She sat at the kitchen table and looked at the ceiling beams, the stone fireplace, the bookshelves that took up most of one wall. "It's very rustic," she said. "I like it," I said. "I can see that." She picked up one of the cookies, examined it, and set it back down without eating it. My son jumped in then, filling the silence with noise the way he always did when things got uncomfortable between the people he loved. He talked about the drive up, about the traffic on 81, about a podcast he had been listening to. I poured the coffee. I listened. I watched her watch me. At some point she asked what I did with my time. "I'm retired," I said. "From?" "Medicine," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Like, what kind of medicine?" "Surgery." The eyebrow didn't come down, but something shifted in her expression, a recalibration. She looked at the house again. I could see her trying to reconcile what she thought she was looking at with what I had just told her. "You don't seem like a surgeon," she said, and I think she meant it as a compliment, though it didn't land that way. "I get that a lot," I said. My son laughed, a little too loudly. She didn't laugh. She was still looking at the bookshelves. "How long have you been retired?" 3 years. "And you're what, early 60s? 63. "Young to retire," she said, in a tone that suggested she thought there might be a reason for it. A less flattering reason. I didn't correct her. I just drank my coffee. They stayed for the afternoon. After coffee, we walked the property, which I think she suggested because she wanted to see the full 14 acres. My son walked beside me, and she walked slightly ahead, the way people do when they're impatient to see what's around the next corner. She stopped at the old stone wall along the northern edge and looked back at the house from that distance. This is a lot of space for one person, she said. I use it, I said. I'm sure you do. She turned to my son. Have you seen the comps out here? Land values in the valley have gone up something like 40% in the last 4 years. My son said he hadn't looked. You should, she said. And the word you did a lot of work in that sentence that I don't think she intended me to hear. But I heard it. When we got back to the house, she asked if she could use the bathroom. And while she was gone, my son sat down across from me at the kitchen table. He had his hands folded in front of him, and he was staring at the grain of the wood. She's a lot to handle sometimes, he said. But she means well. I'm sure she does, I said. He looked up at me. She comes from money, Dad. It's just how she was raised. She's used to a certain kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with where you come from, I said. There's something wrong with looking down on where other people come from. He opened his mouth and closed it again. She came back into the kitchen. She had reapplied her lipstick. She sat down and folded her hands on the table the same way my son had, and I had the brief, disorienting sense that I was watching a rehearsed conversation begin. We've actually been talking about the wedding, she said, and we wanted to discuss it with you. I figured, I said. She smiled, not the greeting smile from the driveway. A more purposeful one. We're thinking about 250 guests. We've looked at a venue outside of Charlottesville. It's a historic plantation property. Very beautiful, very well reviewed. The full package with catering and the photographer we want is coming in around $90,000. The room was quiet for a moment. That's a lot of money, I said. It is, she agreed, as though we had just established common ground. Her family is prepared to contribute, but they're not in a position to cover the whole thing. Given that you're the father of the groom, we thought. We thought, my son said, though it came out as more of a question than a statement. We thought it would make sense to talk about how everyone can pitch in, she finished. I looked at my son. He was looking at the grain of the table again. What does pitching in look like? I asked. We were thinking 30 to 40,000, she said. From your side, I did not react to this. I have operated on human hearts. I have stood at a table for 7 hours, with someone's life in my hands. And the most important thing I ever learned in that operating room was that the moment you let what you're feeling show on your face is the moment you lose control of the room. So I did not react. I just nodded slowly, the way I nod when I'm listening and haven't decided anything yet. I'll think about it, I said. Something flickered in her expression. She had expected a different answer, yes or no. Either would have given her something to work with. Thinking about it was not what she wanted. Of course, she said. We're not asking for an answer today. Good, I said, because I don't have one. She looked at my son. He was still looking at the table. They left around 5. I stood on the porch and watched the silver sedan back out down the gravel drive. My son waved from the passenger window. She did not. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table for a while, in the quiet. Then I picked up the shortbread cookie she had set back down without eating and ate it myself. Because they were good, and because there was no reason to let it go to waste. That night I called my attorney. We had been colleagues once. A long time ago he had done the legal work when I set up my practice, and he had handled the property paperwork when I bought this house. And over the years he had become one of the few people I trusted without reservation. I told him what had happened and what had been said. I told him about the comment about comps and land values. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "How serious is your son about this woman?" "Serious enough to bring her here," I said. "Then you need to move," he said. Not out of paranoia, out of clarity. We talked for an hour. By the end of the conversation, I had a plan. Over the following 2 weeks, I updated my will with specific language about the property. I established a trust with clear terms about what could and could not happen to the land. I transferred certain accounts into structures that were less visible and less accessible to anyone who might come looking. I did not do any of this with anger. I did it the way I had always made important decisions, carefully, completely, and without letting the feeling that drove the decision contaminate the quality of the decision itself. My son called twice during those 2 weeks. Once to ask if I had thought more about the wedding contribution. Once to tell me that his fiancée had mentioned how much she'd loved the property and how much potential it had. I was kind in both conversations. I said I was still thinking. I asked him how work was going, and we talked about that instead. A month later, my son called to say that her parents were coming in from Phoenix for a long weekend, and they wanted all of us to have dinner together. He wanted to do it here, at my house. She had apparently suggested it. The country setting, he said, would be a nice change for her parents. I said yes. I told him I'd cook. I spent 2 days preparing. This is something people who know me understand, and people who have just met me don't. I am a serious cook, not a hobbyist, not a man who grills occasionally and considers himself a cook. I mean someone who has spent decades in an extremely high-pressure, extremely precise profession, and found in cooking the only other discipline that demanded the same level of attention, the same respect for process, the same understanding that there were no shortcuts worth taking. I made stock from scratch. I braised short ribs for 4 hours. I baked bread that morning. They arrived at 6. Her parents came in her family's rental car, a large black SUV. Her mother got out first, a small, careful woman with silver-streaked hair and an expression that looked like it had learned to be pleasant through long practice. Her father got out second. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, probably in his mid-60s. He moved carefully, the way people move when they've been through something that rearranged how they understood their own body. He looked up at the house, and then he looked at me standing on the porch. And something happened in his face that I recognized before I fully understood what it meant. It was the expression of a man who has seen something he was not prepared to see. I came down the porch steps. My son was doing introductions, saying names, managing the social traffic the way he always did. But I was watching her father. He was walking toward me slowly, and he was still wearing that expression. "This is my dad," my son said to her parents. Her father stopped about 4 feet in front of me. He looked at my hands. He looked at my face. His wife reached out and put her hand on his arm. "My God," he said quietly. Her mother looked at him. "Honey?" He ignored her. He was still looking at me. "It's you," he said. Her fiancé made a sound, half a laugh, half something nervous. "Dad, what are you—" "I know this man," her father said. His voice had gone rough. He cleared his throat. He was still looking at me, and now I recognized him too, though it had taken me a moment because people look different when they're vertical and dressed, and not on a table with their sternum open. 12 years ago, I said. "Phoenix Medical," he said. "You came in on a Wednesday night," I said. "Your wife had just gotten you there in time. You were 42 minutes from not making it." Her mother made a sound like a small, sharp exhale. She brought her hand to her mouth. "You did the surgery," her father said. "It wasn't a question." "I did," I said. There was a long silence. The light was doing what late afternoon light does in the valley, going gold and long across the grass, making everything look like it was being shown to you for the last time. Her father stepped forward and put his arms around me. He was a big man and he held on for a moment, and I put my hand on his back because that was the right thing to do. Behind him, I could see her fiancé's face. She had gone pale. She was looking from her father to me and back again, and the calculation she was always doing behind her eyes had stopped completely, replaced by something raw and unprocessed that I don't think she had felt in a long time. "You never told us your last name," her father said when he pulled back. He was holding my shoulders, looking at me. "After? We tried to find you. The hospital said you'd left the practice." "I moved around a lot in those years," I said. "We wanted to thank you. We wanted you to know what he stopped. He was a man who was not accustomed to not being able to finish a sentence." He tried again. "We have a daughter," he said. "She was 10 when it happened. She grew up with her father because of what you did." Nobody spoke. Her mother was crying quietly. My son had his hands in his jacket pockets and his face had gone very still. He was putting something together. Her fiancé looked at me. I have stood in a lot of rooms where people were reconfiguring what they thought they knew. Hospitals teach you to recognize that moment, the moment when information rearranges everything that came before it, when the world someone had been living in reveals itself to have been built on a foundation they didn't know was there. I have delivered news into rooms, good and bad, and I have learned that the best thing you can do in those moments is be still. Let people find their way to the new ground. Don't rush them. Don't perform. Just be still. So I was still. Come inside, I said. Dinner's ready. We sat down at the table I had set the night before. 6 chairs. I have set a place for my son's mother at family dinners since she passed 4 years ago. Not something I broadcast, not something I explain unless someone asks. Just a quiet way of keeping her in the room. My son knows. He glanced at it when he sat down and said nothing, which was the right response. Her father sat across from me. He had composed himself, but his eyes were still bright. He talked differently now than he had when he'd gotten out of the car, less guarded, less the polished Phoenix executive arriving at a farmer's house. He asked me real questions. He listened to the answers. He asked about my career, and I told him some of it. 30 years of cardiothoracic surgery, the last decade of practice split between a hospital in Charlottesville and a volunteer program in rural areas where cardiac care was inaccessible to most people who needed it. I told him about the cases I remembered and the ones I couldn't forget. I told him about why I retired, not because there was anything scandalous in the reason, but because I had done what I set out to do, and I could feel the moment when the work stopped being something I was doing and started being something that was doing me, and I had learned enough about limits to know when to step back. Her father listened to all of it, with the attention of someone who understands that they are hearing something they were meant to hear. Her fiancé was quiet through most of dinner, not the studied quiet of someone managing a room, which was what she had been doing on her first visit. A different kind of quiet. She ate the short ribs, she ate the bread. At one point she looked up and found me looking at her, and she didn't look away immediately, the way she had the first time. She held eye contact for a moment, and in that moment I saw something I hadn't seen before in her. I don't want to overstate it. I'm not a sentimental man, but it looked like the beginning of something, not an apology. Exactly. Not yet, but the recognition that an apology might be owed. After dinner, her father and I sat on the porch with 2 glasses of the bourbon I kept for occasions. The others were inside. I could hear my son doing the dishes he had offered without being asked, which I noticed, and her mother and his fiancé talking in the kitchen in low voices that I couldn't make out. She's a complicated woman, my daughter, he said. He was looking out at the ridge. She was 10 when the heart attack happened, old enough to understand what was at stake. We didn't tell her everything at the time, but kids know. She knew I had almost died. She knew how close it was. He paused. I think it made her afraid in ways that she never fully worked out. You spend your childhood afraid of losing something. You grow up needing to make sure everything is locked down, that you have enough, that you're safe. That doesn't excuse behavior, I said. No, he agreed. It doesn't, but it explains it. He turned to look at me. She's not a bad person. She's a frightened one. There's a difference. I know there is, I said. I've seen both. He nodded. I imagine you have. We sat in silence for a while. The evening had gone dark, and the fireflies were starting. I had forgotten to be angry somewhere over the course of dinner, and now I was just tired and grateful in the specific way you get when something you were dreading turns out to contain something you needed. I owe you my life, he said quietly. You don't owe me anything, I said. That's not how it works. Tell me how it works then. I thought about it. You sit with your daughter, and you tell her what you've told me. You don't protect her from the weight of it. Let her feel what it means. That's all. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, all right. She came outside about 20 minutes after that. Alone. Her father had gone back inside, and I was sitting in the porch rocker with my bourbon, watching the fireflies in the tall grass along the fence line. She stood at the edge of the porch with her arms crossed, not defensively, just like someone who was cold. Can I sit? She asked. Chair's empty, I said. She sat. She looked out at the same darkness I was looking at. She didn't say anything for a little while, which was the first thing she'd done since I met her that felt unmanaged. He never talked about the surgery, she said, finally, or about the doctor who did it. He never talked about that whole time. My mom would sometimes mention being grateful, but my dad he moved on, like he needed to move on. People do that, I said. I didn't know what it meant that he almost died, she said. I mean, I knew it factually, but I didn't understand it. You know what I mean? There's knowing something and understanding something. Yes, I said. I understood it tonight, she said. When he walked up to you and his face, when I saw his face, she stopped. I understood it. The fireflies blinked in the grass. Somewhere up the ridge an owl was working. I've been terrible to you, she said. It came out plainly, without the packaging people usually put around admissions like that. You've been unkind, I said. There's still time to be something else. The things I said about the house, about the property, about the money, what about them? I don't actually need a $90,000 wedding, she said. I don't even know when I decided I did. I think I got into the habit of wanting things that looked a certain way. Like if everything looked secure enough, I'd finally feel it. I didn't respond to that immediately, because it deserved to be received rather than answered. Your son loves you, she said. He talks about you. He talks about you like you hung something. I don't think I fully listened to what he was actually saying. What was he saying? That you're a good man. She paused. That you're the best person he knows. He said that once, and I remember thinking it was a sweet thing to say about a father. I didn't think about what it meant. The rocking chair creaked under me. I was thinking about my son, 11 years old, helping me fix the fence for the first time out here, not knowing how to hold the post-hole digger properly, his hands getting blistered before he'd admit they were hurting. I'm not asking you to like me, I said. I'm not asking for anything. But if you marry my son, I'd like you to know something. What? This house and this land, they're not what I leave him. I never cared about that. What I leave him is what I taught him about how to be in the world, how to be decent when things are hard, how to show up when it costs something, how to be the person who is still standing when everything else is cleared away. I looked at her. I've been building that for 30 years. You can't appraise it, you can't find a comp for it, but it's worth more than anything else I own. She looked at me for a long time. In the light coming through the window from inside the house, I could see that her eyes were wet. I know that now, she said quietly. My son was doing dishes when I came back inside. I picked up a dish towel without saying anything and started drying. We worked in silence for a few minutes. Her parents were at the kitchen table, her mother looking at something on her phone, her father sitting with his hands around a coffee mug, looking at nothing in particular. Dad, my son said. Will, why didn't you ever tell me? About the surgery in Phoenix. About I didn't even know you did volunteer work. You never mentioned the rural program. I thought about this. I didn't do it to be mentioned, I said. I did it because it needed doing. He handed me a pot to dry. That's a very you answer. I know. How many people? He asked. Over your career, how many people did you? I don't keep count, I said. You keep count. You start doing it for the count. You stop doing it for the person. He was quiet. Then he said, I'm sorry. For the wedding thing. For the money conversation. I let her take the lead on that, and I shouldn't have. No, I agreed. You shouldn't have. I should have been honest with you. You should have been honest with yourself, I said. I already knew what was going on. I was watching to see what you'd do. He flinched slightly. And now you're washing dishes and apologizing, which is a better answer than the one you gave me last month. He laughed, a short, surprised sound. That's a low bar, Dad. Start with a low bar, I said. Clear it, then raise it. Her father laughed from the kitchen table. He had been listening. He's right, he said. That's a good way to live. My son looked at him, then at me. He shook his head slowly, like he was recalibrating something about the night, about the last several weeks, about something larger than either. So what happens now? He asked. Now? I handed back the pot. Now you finish the dishes and then we have the apple cake I made this afternoon and you let me tell your future in-laws an embarrassing story about you from when you were 9. Oh God, my son said. Not the fishing story. Especially the fishing story. Her father laughed again, and I could hear her behind me, coming back in from the porch, and I heard her laugh too, not the managed social laugh from the afternoon, but something that started lower and came out honest. The dishes got done. The apple cake came out well. I told the fishing story. They left around 10. Her father held my hand in both of his at the door, the way men do when a handshake isn't enough for what they're trying to say. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. I understood. My son hugged me, which he doesn't always do. He held on for a moment. I love you, Dad, he said into my shoulder. I know, I said. Go home, drive carefully. I stood on the porch and watched the two cars go down the gravel drive. The silver sedan went first. She was in the passenger seat, and before they reached the tree line, she turned and looked back at the house. I raised my hand. She raised hers. Then they were through the trees, and the lights were gone. I stayed on the porch for a while after. The night was full now, the ridge invisible against a sky that had more stars than clouds, and the fireflies were still working their patient signals in the grass. I listened to the owls. I listened to the creek moving in the dark somewhere past the north fence. I listened to the specific silence of a house that has had people in it and is now returning to itself. I thought about her father at 42, on a table in Phoenix, a Wednesday night, nobody expecting what was coming. I thought about the call I had gotten just as I was finishing with another patient, the resident's voice, clipped and urgent. I thought about walking into that room and seeing what I saw, and knowing immediately what had to happen and how fast. I thought about the feeling of a heart that has stopped, and then, under your hands, starts again. You do that work long enough, you understand something that is hard to put into words. Life is not a thing that belongs to us. It passes through us. We hold it as carefully as we can for as long as we're given it, and then we hand it to the next person, and the whole enterprise is bigger and longer than any one person's piece of it. I had held that man's life in my hands for 4 hours on a Wednesday night in Phoenix. And now his daughter was going to marry my son, and she had sat on my porch and told me the truth. And something had shifted, not fixed, maybe, not all the way, but pointed in a better direction than it had been pointed this morning. That was enough. That was what I had learned, over 30 years and more cases than I could count. Enough was enough. You didn't need the whole story to resolve itself cleanly. You just needed to see that it was moving towards something better than where it had been. I went inside. I washed the last of the glasses and turned off the kitchen light. I stood for a moment in the doorway, looking at the table, 6 chairs. One of them empty in the way it was always empty now, the way I had learned to be at peace with. Good night, I said to the room. Then I went up to bed, in the house I had earned, on the land I had built something on, in the life I had made with my own hands. And that, in the end, was the whole story.